This is Dharma Drops with your host, Rebecca Warfield. This podcast is a little bit about yoga, a little bit about life, and a little bit about whatever. And just as a warning, this podcast is unscripted, so that means I might regret a few things that I say. But hey, maybe I'll say some pretty awesome stuff too. Remember, these are musings, not truths. Buckle up, giddy up, because here we go. Oh, hey there. It's me, your host of Dharma Drops podcast, Rebecca Warfield, and this is your mini drop episode for Dharma Drops podcast. So just in case you're new to Dharma Drops podcast, or if you're just tuning in to the mini episodes for the first time, these are short little episodes that come out on Wednesday that are really designed to hold you over until the regular episodes come out every other Friday. So the regular episodes are always with a guest. You're just stuck with me on Wednesdays, but it's just you and me. It's like two BFFs just hanging out, right? You're my best friend. I'm your best friend. We're just hanging out. So there's been a lot going on in Dharma Drops the last couple weeks or so. I mean, I feel like I say that all the time because it's true all the time. I'm always doing something for Dharma Drops. This is my full-time job, my full-time gig, and so I'm working all the time on it. So in any case, there's been a ton of things happening, but what I'm really excited about is that my new course, Womb Awakenings, is open now today for registration. So February 26th, today, 2020, you can register and all the content is available for Womb Awakenings. So rather than this mini drop episode being the audio version of the card reading like I've been doing the last few weeks, you, BFF, are getting a sneak peek into the Womb Awakenings audio course. And by sneak peek, I mean you're getting a full audio lesson for this Dharma mini drops episode. So before we start the episode, I'll give you a little background about how the Womb Awakenings course came to be. So I have been offering online courses through Dharma Drops, mostly for yoga teachers and a little bit for yoga practitioners. But in late 2019 and early 2020, which is something I haven't really disclosed publicly on Dharma Drops before, I had the unfortunate experience of recurring miscarriages. I had one at the end of 2019 that took 7 weeks for the embryo to pass, which I didn't even know was a possibility in the body. I just thought that it was something that if a miscarriage happens, it just happens and it's done. I had no idea it could take that long. And then unfortunately, I had a second one in early 2020. So through these experiences, having recurring miscarriages, what I realize is that I have a tremendous connection to the physical body through my yoga practice, but I've forgotten the whole womb space. I had no idea that these things can go on in the body. I had no idea really what's even happening in the womb at any time of my entire life. And the more I publicly, which publicly is maybe a interesting word for that. It was like publicly, privately, publicly talked about it. This is my first time publicly talking about it. But the more I talked about it in my private conversations, I realized that I'm not alone in this at all. Not the miscarriage and pregnancy part, but this disconnect from the body. And what I think is the most important from this is it's not just that we as a culture have become disconnected from the womb, we've become disconnected from the sacred feminine powers of the womb. And look, I know that sounds woo-woo. I'm always sort of back and forth with the woo-woo thing, but the reality is the womb space carries tremendous potential. It gives life. It grows human beings. If that's not some magical shit, I don't know what is. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to let you listen to one of the full audio lessons from Womb Awakenings, which is a pretty good deal because I think there's only 5 lessons. So you're getting a pretty big part of it for free. So here we go into what I'm calling lesson 2, potential and creation, the lower chakras. We are in lesson 2 of Womb Awakenings. So before we get into this lesson, let's do just a quick recap of lesson 1. In lesson 1, we talked about the womb cycle or the menstrual cycle, what's happening at the physical level of the body from menstruation to pre-ovulation, ovulation, and then premenstruation. And this is, of course, happening at the physical level of the body, what we often call in the yogic studies, the gross body. And I want to clarify that language I don't really love it that much because even though the word gross doesn't mean gross or dirty, I do feel like often there is language associated with the feminine body that pulls us away from the sacred. Words like gross, and like if you go to the drugstore to get tampons or anything like that, the sign says feminine hygiene, which indicates there's a dirtiness about it. And so for us to reconnect with the womb and to get into the sacred, I think it's really important for us to think about language that doesn't have negative connotations associated with it. So rather than calling this the gross body, let's just get really simple and call it the physical body. So in lesson 1, we talked about the physical body, the physical womb cycle. But in order to move into this womb awakening, in order to understand the energetics of the sacred feminine, we have to move beneath the physical body into what is called the subtle body. So for those of you who are very new to this study, you might be like, a subtle body? What does that mean? The subtle body is the energetic body. And so that might take a little time to wrap your brain around, but essentially it's the energy, right? It's the energy of feeling grounded. It's the energy of feeling creative. It's the energy of feeling passion and fire and love and empowerment, right? All these things that we feel are part of the subtle body. So there's a lot of different ways to talk about the subtle body, but I'm going to talk about it in particular with the chakra system because this is pretty important to the concept of the womb and the sacred feminine. So the chakras, there are 7 main chakras, although in the ancient yogic teachings there are more chakras, but there are 7 main chakras that we focus on in the subtle body studies for the most part. The chakras were said to be wheelhouses or wheels of energy. And though you do not have wheels of energy in your body, that would be crazy, right? If you had little wheels turning along your spine, you do not have wheels of energy. What you do have, where each of the 7 chakras are said to be, you do have a bundling of nerves called ganglia that move from the back of the spine forward toward the abdomen. And interestingly, where the ancient yogis thought the chakras were, that's exactly where the ganglia little bundlings are. So kind of interesting. They were definitely on to something with this energetic subtle body. So we don't need to talk about all of the chakras today. It's a lot of information. It's a whole study in itself. Maybe one day I'll put out a course about the chakras. But for now, I think what's most important for us to start working with are the first 3 chakras. So chakra 1 is Muladhara chakra. Muladhara chakra. And if you feel crazy saying it, you can call it Muladhara chakra, right? Muladhara chakra. So Muladhara chakra, this is the base. This is the root. It's our connection with the earth. So this bundling of nerves or this chakra is associated with earth, and we find our connection to it through the feet and the legs. So that kind of makes sense, right? These are the things that connect with the earth. Then we move into the second chakra, which this is the really important part when it comes to womb awakening and the sacred feminine. The second chakra is the womb space. It's housed in the lower abdomen, right? It's associated with the sacral part of the body, and it is called Svadhisthana. Svad, S-V-A-D, Histhana, Histhana, Svadhisthana. And so this is the space of the womb. This is the sacred feminine. And this space is associated with the lower abdomen, the genitals, the womb, and it's the element of water. It's movement, it's creativity. It is the space of desire, pleasure, sexuality, and procreation. And so what I want to emphasize before we get too much into the second chakra, that the first step to womb awakening is to balance the first chakra. Because the way the chakra system works, the way I have been taught that the chakra system works, I should clarify, is that the chakra that we are focusing on is affected by the one below it and affects the one above it. So if we want to tap into the womb space, the first thing that we have to do is get steady and get grounded. And so I like to think about this as a cup holding water. So the first chakra is the cup. It's the solid surface, right? It's the container. It's like the protector. And then the water goes in the cup. And inside the cup, that water can move around freely and be creative and flow, but it doesn't spill. But when that cup starts to tip side to side, when the cup gets a crack in it and the water starts to leak out, that's when things start to get a little out of control. So when we're talking about womb awakening and sacred feminine, the first step is to start working with the first chakra. So let's backtrack then to the first chakra. We'll get to the second one, I promise you. So the first chakra is associated with earth, and it's called Muladhara. Muladhara. Muladhara, and it's the root. The purpose here is foundation. And so this is really the foundation of our lives. And so when we're thinking about the first chakra in relationship to womb awakening, what we're really doing is getting steady in who we are, getting steady in our concept of femininity, getting grounded in our purpose, getting grounded in our truth. And you might be thinking, God, how do I do that? That's a really big question. And that depends on where you are feeling unrooted in your life. But there are a few ways. And I really recommend the book Eastern Body, Western Mind. I will have a link to this in the course for you beneath this audio recording, so you can check out the book. But in Anodea Judith's Eastern Body, Western Mind, she gives a lot of healing practices. And similarly, she also gives a lot of healing practices in her book, Wheels of Life. So you can check out both of these beneath this audio recording. But in terms of the first chakra, the goal here is to reconnect with the body. And if you think about this, even if you go back to lesson 1, what we were talking about is understanding the physical practices, the physical process of the body. What does this body do? How does this body serve us? So when we're talking about reconnecting to the womb, this is where the study of the womb space, the study of your cycle comes into play. Additionally, this is also an opportunity for us to think about the activities that serve our bodies. Where do we need to maybe find a little more strength in the body, a little more flexibility in the body? Because we're really literally talking about the earth element of the body, which is this physical body. Ooh, good news. Touch, massage, this is all very good for the first chakra. So this is about bringing sensation back into the body. And at a deeper level, what we're thinking about in the first chakra is reclaiming the rights to our body. And I don't know if it's necessarily the right time for this conversation in this community to talk about how the feminine rights have been stripped away. But I think most of us, in some ways in our lives, we have felt that we have lost the rights to our body. And so the first chakra is asking us to remind ourselves that we are in this body, we own this body. And most importantly, we love this body and we trust this body. So the first chakra, that cup that will hold everything that comes after this, is getting reconnected with your body, loving your body for what it is, taking good care of your body, and reminding yourself that this body is whole, this body is real, and this body has a goddamn right to be here. Okay, so that's the first chakra. It's just sort of a snapshot overview. I do want to note that the chakra study is enormous. So this recording is definitely not everything that you need to know, but it's a place to start in connection with this womb awakening sacred feminine practice. So we get that first chakra steady. We connect to the earth, we connect to our bodies, and we understand our bodies. That becomes the cup, the steadiness, the foundation that holds the second chakra. Interestingly, what's called the demon of the second chakra, and I actually don't like that word either. I really don't like these negative words. I think maybe the better word is the conflict for the second chakra is guilt. And this is pretty interesting because the first chakra is asking us to love our bodies, and to do that, we can't have any guilt about them. And so this sort of is a good example of how the first and second chakra relate. When we are able to love our bodies and understand our bodies and own our bodies, we experience less guilt, which then allows us to get into the work of the second chakra more. So the balanced characteristics, according to Anna Dea Judith, of the second chakra is graceful movement, emotional intelligence, ability to experience pleasure, nurturance of self and others, ability to change, and the ability to establish healthy boundaries. And I think the big one here is the ability to experience pleasure, because I think for a lot of women, this is really difficult. And I'm actually not much of an expert on experiencing pleasure. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I have even started this journey with you, is to start talking about these things and uncovering how we can experience pleasure. So I do want to give you a resource about pleasure. Although it's grounded in tarot, I do think that she is an expert about pleasure and speaks about pleasure in really accessible, tangible ways. So Lindsay Mack, Lindsay, Lindsay Mack has a course called Nourishing the Wild Heart, and it's looking at the sweet cards of the tarot. But she talks a lot about pleasure and the ability to receive pleasure in our lives. In my experience, it's been a really useful resource to talk about pleasure. And just like the books, I will list that course underneath the audio recording so you can check it out. But in any case, this is the place of pleasure, of creativity, of enjoyment, of feelings. And so when we have had things happen in our lives, whether it's abuse, emotional abuse, enmeshment, manipulation, physical abuse, these start to wall off our ability to experience pleasure. And so when we're reconnecting with the womb space, what we're really doing is reconnecting with pleasure and reconnecting with creativity, because within them we experience potential. And so I think a lot of times when we're talking about the second chakra, what we're always coming back to is sex. But sex is a really good example of what happens here in terms of pleasure. You have sex, you enjoy it, and then there's potential for life. Right? So sure, there is that literal component of it, but there's also the metaphorical. You do this thing, you have a good time, you enjoy it, and from that comes the possibility to create life. So the big question then is, in terms of reconnecting with the womb, what does this mean for you on the larger scale? Yes, absolutely. This can mean things like getting pregnant, having a family. But when we're talking about the sacred feminine, it's more than that. We're talking about the subtleness of it. So in what ways can we get steady, build that cup, then fill that cup with pleasure, experience, joy, and then how can those things create opportunity, create life, create pathways for new growth in your business, pathways for new growth in your relationships, in your home. You get to fill in the blanks about what this means. But the undercurrent of the second chakra is pleasure in the effort to create life. So this is asking us then to look at, where are we denying ourselves pleasure? Where are we denying ourselves the opportunity to do the things that we love? And this goes back, I think, to the first chakra. We have cut ourselves off physically, and so we walk around this world not knowing who we are, not knowing what our bodies crave. So when we get that first chakra stable, then we're able to fill our cup with the things that we love. And of course, women have been denied sexuality, sensuality, pleasure for, I don't know, 1,000,000 years. So this is reconnecting with what it is that brings pleasure into your life. So the second chakra, like all chakras, can have a deficiency or they can be an excess. So a deficient second chakra is rigid. There's a lack of creativity, a lack of pleasure, excessive boundaries. And my guess is that many of us fall into this category. I know everyone's different, but I think culturally, a lot of women have been cut off from this section of their bodies. I even think about, like, especially in the 90s, which I'm dating myself, but in the 90s, there was this need to have this flat washboard abs, especially the lower abdomen, right? Because they were like low-rise jeans and like the belly button was always hanging out, and like the thong was always hanging out in the back. So this whole sacral area, the lower abdominal area, was tight. It was pulled in and it was muscular. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with being strong. There's nothing wrong with having flat abs, but it kind of serves as a metaphor for the cultural values of the time that have since permeated into present day. So it's that rigidity of that space, the inability to open up and go with the flow and to breathe easily. But at the same time, there's also the ability to have an excess in the second chakra, which could be sexual acting out, pleasure addiction, oversensitive emotions, and poor boundaries. So in that case, there needs to be a harnessing in order to find a balance of the chakra. So the question is for you, in what ways are you deficient in the second chakra? In what ways are you in excess? And there are questions in your workbook that you can answer that can help you go through this. But even if you don't use the workbook, you can start thinking about this on your own, just in your inner dialogue. In what ways am I cutting myself off from pleasure? And in what ways am I giving too much pleasure out? This can take any shape. Maybe you're cutting yourself off from creative pleasure. You haven't done the creative things that you love to do in a decade, but you're finding pleasure in ways that aren't serving you. So it's a balance. We all have some deficiencies. We all have some excess. So this is an opportunity to reconnect with the womb. It's an opportunity then to bring all this back together, to find a place of stasis so that the water inside that cup can move. It's not rock solid, it's not frozen, but it's also not pouring over. So some healing practices that are associated with the second chakra: movement, movement, movement. Move your bodies, close your eyes, and move in any way that feels good. Look, no one's going to see you. Close your blinds, kick your kids out of the house for 15 minutes if possible. No one will see you. Turn on some music and just move. I understand that for some people that doesn't feel good, so there's some other things you can do. You can get an adult coloring book and color. You can sing some songs. Anything that you think is creative and that helps you express, do it. If you find that you are slightly in excess, a good practice for you is boundaries. So setting boundaries, giving yourself time limits, maybe not talking to that one person that always gets you a little overly emotional, assigning healthy pleasures in your life. And I know a lot of this doesn't sound like the womb because we're talking about things like pleasure and creativity. But again, this is the space of potential. Yes, on the physical level, we have the potential to create life, but this is about creation, right? Creation is the name of the game in the second chakra, which then brings us to the third chakra. So let's think about this. The first chakra is the cup. The second chakra is the water. The third chakra is heat. It's transformation. It's what turns our creativity into something. It's transformation. So if you light a fire underneath water, it transforms into steam, right? It moves into something else. And that's what happens when we then put the third chakra on top. So the third chakra is the element of fire. It's called Manipura, Manipura, Manipura chakra. And its purpose is to transform. So it's energy, activity, autonomy, individualism, self-esteem, power. So if we have this water in the cup, then it turns into something else. So at the most physical level, if we're talking about the womb, we have then the potential for a baby, and then we have this transformation into life. And metaphorically, this is the same for our lives. We set the foundation, we build the cup, we put the creativity of water in it, and then we let the fire burn to create something else. I don't think we need to get too deeply into the third chakra for this course, but what I want to underscore is that through creativity, we are able to manifest. We are able to transform our lives. And that's the power of the womb. And that's the power of the sacred feminine, to harness the creativity in the effort to transform. That's a lot. I recommend that you listen to this a couple of times and then head over to the workbook and answer the questions that are there to help you work through this material. There's also a section for taking notes in the workbook, so jot down anything that you were thinking of, any questions you have, so that way when you re-listen to this, you are able to come back to those questions. So remember, first chakra is the cup. Second chakra is the water, the potential. And then the third chakra is what takes that potential and transforms your life into whatever the hell you want it to be. So that's it for today's mini drop episode and for your sneak peek at the Womb Awakening audio course. If you enjoyed the audio lesson from Womb Awakening, then I do encourage you to head over to dharmadropspodcast.com, click online courses, and register for Womb Awakening there. I get it, money doesn't grow on trees, so I priced the course for only $22. And if money is an issue, then you can also pay 2 payments of $11 over the course of 2 months. So hopefully that way it'll work within everyone's budget. So a couple of things that we'll be looking at in the entire course, some questions that we'll explore: what happens energetically to the body during each phase of the menstrual cycle? How do women's energetic needs align with the larger energetic qualities of nature and the universe? What metaphors serve as teachers for inquiry and understanding of the sacred feminine and womb space? How can women honor the spiritual and energetic needs of the womb and sacred feminine while living a modern life? And that's a pretty important part because, again, I'm into the woo-woo, but I also live in 2020 and I try to keep things real. So even though this will be some spiritual, energetic stuff that might be a little out there, we're going to ground it in real life ways, which means even thinking about this stuff is not even truth, just metaphor, if that's what works for you. The course is self-paced. Everything is audio with full transcripts for you to use if maybe you want to print them out and study and follow along, or to make it more accessible for all learning needs. There will be a bonus mantra video and a yoga class included. And one of my favorite things about the course, it will also have a digital workbook with questions that you can answer along the way through the course to help you get more out of it and to make more meaning and to really start that inquiry into the sacred feminine. Okay, that's it for this episode of Dharma Drops Podcast. You can always follow me on Instagram at Dharma Drops Podcast, and you can find all the Dharma Drops shenanigans at dharmadropspodcast.com. All right, guys, see you Friday with the full length episode.